Okay, so this is going to be your complete beginner's guide to getting a job in the mining industry. Now, every day I'm seeing people, complain about, they've been putting out lots of resumes and they're not getting any replies. And, it's kind of a strange disconnect because, on one side you got the mining companies and they're crying for guys. I've read, countless articles already about, how they can't fill enough roles and they need 80,000 workers to fill demand by 2030. The price of minerals has been going up, steadily for the past couple of years. But then I see all these comments about people that just can't get a job, they can't get in. So it makes me wonder, and I've thought about it, and the trend that I see is a lot of times is the experience doesn't really have anything to do with it. A lot of new hires, they think that it's an experience thing, and it's not an experience thing. You can carry over knowledge from another job. Like, if you were a flatbed truck driver, you can be a nipper. If you were helping pipe fitters, you can hang services. These are all transferable skills, right? As long as you can frame it in a way that shows your future bosses that you can do this, this is like these jobs are easy for you. You're confident walking in. How do you become confident? Well, you have to learn the mining systems, you have to learn the mining lingo, you have to understand what a mining cycle is. You got to be able to talk mining with these guys, and that's going to go a long way into getting you a job. So I'm going to break down a few things that are going to help you in your quest to become a miner. And the first thing is we're going to say is, why mining? Why do we want to become a miner, be a miner? Well, there's a few things, and I'm biased because I've been a miner for 26 years. So, I cheer about this industry, but the first thing is salary. There's in the trades, you're going to make good money. There's no doubt about it. Mechanics, they do well. Welders, they do well. Plumbers, they do well, and they're all very, very necessary, trades to have to keep our world going. But mining is a special kind of beast because you don't need to go an apprenticeship. You don't need to have an apprenticeship. You don't need to get an apprentice. You don't need to go to school. You can walk in off the street with heart and some grit and some previous experience, just working, being a grunt, and you can make $70, $80, $100,000 plus. You're not going to get that anywhere else in any other industry. You're not going to go framing houses and making that kind of money. It's just not going to happen. Like any other industry, list anything that's going to pay you that, and I'll be surprised. Second is lifestyle. Mining gives you such a great, work-life balance. It's great for a family man. It's great for a single guy. It's great for a guy who's semi-retired even, because, a lot of the popular rotations are, you have 2 and 2, which is in Canada. I can't speak for anywhere else, but in Canada, that's the most popular rotation. If you're going to work for a contractor specifically, you're going to be on a 2 weeks in and a 2 weeks out. And there are some 3 and 3s as well, which is even better. There are a few pros and cons to each. I can break those down, but not in this video. But we're gonna have half the month off. You can be with your loved ones. You can hang out with your kids. You can do whatever you want in your 2 weeks off. Your boss doesn't even call you. Doesn't even bug you. When you're at work, you're at work though. And that's 12 hours a day. And you're doing that for 14 days straight. But you put in your time and then you go home. There's no downside to that. 5 days a week, I worked 5 days a week a long time ago, and it doesn't compare. for the amount of time with your family, or with your friends, and vacation time you get. Plus, in the mining industry, you get 2 weeks paid holidays. You a lot of times guys can bank it and just get paid out at the end of the year, but you get 2 weeks. And in companies, they build on that. So you start off with 2 weeks, you can end up with 3 weeks. You're working less than half the year. There's no better rotation. And you don't need a degree. You literally do not need to spend 1 minute in school to become a miner. Don't need to. You just, like, you can put all these preconceived notions about having to go to university. I think we're past that. I think we're past the point in the way the world's moving that you're going to need a degree to be successful in life. You don't. Let's put that to bed. So you become a miner, no degree. You don't even need any certs right off the bat. You don't need any certs. It helps. It definitely helps. But I see it all the time. Guys get hired, they're not certified in anything, but these companies, they like you. They're going to train you. They're going to train you on site, and you're eventually going to get if you're in Ontario, you're going to get your Common Core. You don't need to go spend 11, 12. I heard a guy spending 15 grand on Common Core. There's no need for it. If you educate yourself in the mining systems, and you can talk mining with these guys, that'll get your foot in the door. That'll put you heads and shoulders above your competition. And if there's these jobs, you're going to get it. Entry level job, you're going to get it. There's no question. What entry level roles are there? So in the mining industry, you're gonna start off as either a nipper. Nipper is they're kind of your lifeblood of the mine. Like, they're making sure that everybody gets their gear. The bolters got their bolts and they get their screen. They got jumbo steel for the drillers. You got pipe. The service crew. They get their pipe. They get their 2, their 4, and their 6-inch pipe. Construction gets paste line. For backfill. Vent tube. You name it. It comes underground, and it's the nipper's job to get it to where it's got to go. You have various strategic gear storages that are around the mine, and those are his. He can take ownership of those. He makes sure that they're clean, they're that everything is in its order, everything's easy to find. That's a nipper's job. Very, very important job. Your next job is going to be truck drivers. So if you're not a nipper, you're going to probably come in as a truck driver, and truck driver is also essential to the life of the mine. You have to get the ore to the mill. That's at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. So you have your scoop operators. They're going to be mucking these blasted rounds. They're going to be mucking it into trucks, and these trucks tend to be 20, 30, 40-ton trucks. Those are typically your underground sizes, and they're going to be hauling to various places. They're going to be hauling to to ore passes, to the grizzlies, rock breakers, so that they can handle the big muck and break it down. And then it's going to end up with the skip tender, who is going to take that muck and send it up in the skips, and it's going to end up at the mill. But for all of that to happen, you got to have truck drivers, and they got to get the rocks to the box. That's what you'll hear, fairly often, is you got to get the rocks to the box, and that's how we make our bonus. You got to get the ore up. Then you have offsiders. Now, offsiders, you call them helpers, whatever, but basically, your offsider is, they're going to be helping your jumbo man. And nowadays, we're doing a lot of jumbo bolting. We're bolting with the jumbos. So, now you have a a helper who basically drives LVs with, buggies or Toyota Land Cruisers usually, and they're going to be, bringing them bolts. They're, split sets, rebar, whatever it is. They're going to be bringing them the bolts. They're going to be bringing them resin. They're going to be, bringing them parts, screen, whatever it is. A lot of times, and if he's in a drilling cycle, and they're not bolting, he's going to be going to the next round, and he's going to be making sure that everything's ready to go. Jumbo Man is the top dog on the crew. He's the tip of the spear. So, he goes to a round and it's not ready to go. He's not going to be very happy. So your job is to get there, make sure everything's set up. If there's something that needs to be fixed, call ahead, get on the radio, get service guys in there, get the scoop in there, whatever has to be done, prep the face. But when that Jumbo Man gets there, that face is ready to go and he can drill his round. And that's an offsider's job also, very important. And that could be your job too. You also have other jobs, that you might have, and obviously service crew. We need air, we need water, we need get the wastewater out of the mine. You got to hang vent tube. You got to breathe. We got to get fresh air to these headings. He hangs that jumbo cable. You got to have power. Important job. And, let's just throw in some, another entry-level job. That'll be, diamond driller helper or assistant driller, sometimes they're called. That's the exploration. It's kind of completely separate from development mining. But, there's a good chance that you could start off, as an assistant driller on diamond drill. And his job is basically, you're helping your driller out. You're picking rods up. You're bringing them rods. There's a host of different tasks that entails. Okay, so moving on is how to build your resume. You got to have a proper resume. I think that's what trips up a lot of guys is they don't have a proper resume. They're not optimized. They're not optimized for ATS. They don't use keywords. They don't get through to the gatekeepers. You gotta get your resume fixed up so that a human being can see it. That's going to put you, it's going to give you a 10x better chance of getting a job. I think the vast majority of these people that complain about not getting a job when they're applying for all these mining jobs is they're just not getting through the algorithm. And that's basically it. Where to find these jobs. You go to Indeed. That's everybody's first guess, and that's where having a optimized resume is going to be helpful. LinkedIn is honestly my favorite my favorite mode of job hunting. The past 15 years, well, maybe not 15, maybe 10, let's say. However long LinkedIn's been around and I've had a profile, that's what I've been using. It's opened up an entire world for a miner, for any worker. There's a job that you hear about that you're interested in, you can enter it in, and depending on how many links you have, if you've been building up your LinkedIn and you've been contributing on LinkedIn and you've been networking on LinkedIn, you have a lot of connections after a while. And let's say there's a job that I hear about. I'm interested. I want to learn more about it. I enter it in, and it's going to give you a list of people that that are working there, and you can just direct message them and say, look, what's happening? What's the bonus like? What's are they looking for guys? And they're going to help you out. God, there's opportunities to become linked up with the mine manager. There's lots of that. So it's an invaluable tool that you have to develop. And now the next thing is what an interview looks like. You're going to be you get an interview. Lots of times they're online, because you got guys from all over the country now, but you're going to be with HR. Maybe you've been with the superintendent, and they're not very long. Like it's nothing to get yourself stressed out about. Usually, they just ask you a few questions. They want to know kind of what your experience is. But your job in those interviews is just to be likable. If you're a good guy, and you're able to frame what if you don't have any mining experience, you can frame what you did before and roll that into how you can be an asset to that operation, that project, and that's going to go a long way. They're going to like you. Let's just boil all that down to just you want them to like you. What to expect when you get this job? What you're going to expect on your first day underground? Now, when your first run underground, they're not going to be. You don't have to worry about a lot of pressure being put on you. They typically they're going to take it easy on you for the first run, maybe even your second run, but you're almost going to be like shadowing a guy. They don't want you going off on your own. It takes honestly, average, I would say 6 months for any new person, myself included, starting in a new mine, to learn how to get around in these mines. Like some of these mines are they're 100 years old, and from the upper levels down, but on the modern levels that they've been developing, there's so much going on that it take you 6 months, sometimes even a year, to figure out where to go in these, so it's they're not going to throw you to the wolves for your first rotation. They're going to have you with experienced guys that can watch you, and they're gonna guide you, and they're showing you when if you need this, go here. If you need that, you can go back here. They introduce you to all the guys in the mine. The more you make friends in the mine, and then when you need parts, you need gear, you know where to go, who to talk to, this is the mechanic shop, this is where the electricians are. When you're calling on the radio, this is how you call the radio in this mine. It's just they're never ever gonna just let you loose in the mine, so you don't have to worry about that. Not a lot of pressure, but as the the months progress, and you're gonna get more and more. They're gonna pile more and more tasks on your lineup, and that's typically how it goes. But you'll be set up by that. You'll be ready for it. All right, so I feel like this is kind of a very good primer on as a beginner, for a guide on how to get into mining. Now, if there's anything else you want to know, obviously, I'll probably, have to, update this in a few months or whatever. But, if there's anything you need to know, don't hesitate to ask me. You can go to CanadianUndergroundTraining.com. You can get a free guide that's going to answer, most, if not all, of your questions. You can go to Canadian Underground Training, my YouTube channel. You can Instagram, all the same handles. You can go to any of those, and you can reach me there to ask me any question you want at any time, and I would love to help you. So hope to hear from you. Bye.